Discovered my ex-fiancé sabotaged our relationship to give me the family he thought he couldn't provide, leaving me devastated. About 2 years ago, my world turned upside down when my ex-fiancé, who I'd shared nearly a decade of my life with, just abruptly left me. There were no warning signs, no fights, nothing that could have prepared me. We were deep into wedding plans, finally ready to try for a baby since we were both in our 30s and feeling the pressure of time. Then, out of nowhere, his entire demeanor changed. The morning I love you stopped. He started spending more and more time out drinking with his friends, barely present at home. I knew he'd struggled with his mental health, especially during those suffocating COVID lockdowns, so I assumed this was just another downward spiral. One day, desperate for answers, I sat him down. At first, he tried to brush it off. "I'm fine," he kept insisting. So I changed tack, asked if we were okay. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else than there with me. I pushed again. He paused, and I just knew. It was over. I asked him, "Do you still love me?" He said, "I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore." That was it. Within a week, he'd packed up and disappeared, leaving 90% of his stuff behind, like he wanted to haunt me with his absence. That pain hit me so incredibly hard I could barely function. I spiraled, completely losing myself. I reached the darkest place I've ever been in, and just wanted out, believing there must have been something so wrong with me if he'd just leave like that. The only thing that saved me was a friend catching on and dragging me to the hospital in time. Even though everything still hurt, at least it was survivable after that. It was that friend who became my lifeline. I never set out to have another relationship, especially so soon, but his constant support, his words and presence made me believe I was worth something. Over time, feelings just naturally grew. We built something beautiful, full of unexpected laughter and comfort. 9 months into our relationship, surprise, we found out I was pregnant. Yes, it was new, but we decided, heart and all, we'd keep the baby. 9 months after that, our beautiful daughter was born. We're still going strong to this day, building the family I'd once given up on ever having. Now, fast forward to the present. I hear my ex has been going through a lot. His family had suffered several deaths, and his mother, who I'm still close with, reached out asking if I could meet with him. Evidently, he had something he needed to get off his chest. She didn't know what it was, just that it was between him and me. Part of me wanted to say no, but I took some days to think about it and eventually agreed. I got to the coffee shop early, desperate for caffeine after all those early morning wake-ups and night feeds. When he arrived, he looked so small, just the shadow of the man I'd loved. He offered this sad, almost pitiful smile, and I just nodded for him to sit and get on with whatever he had to say. Nothing could have prepared me for what spilled out next. He explained that when we started trying for a baby and nothing was happening, despite tracking my ovulation to the day and testing constantly, he'd started to worry. Secretly, he took a day off work to see a fertility doctor. Turns out, he had some undiagnosed issue with one of his testicles, making the chance of him ever conceiving a child incredibly low. He told me he knew how deeply I loved him, and that if I knew, I would have given up on being a mother just to stay with him, and he couldn't live with that guilt. He wanted me to have the life and family I deserved, even if it was with someone else. He apologized, over and over, for shattering me in the process, but seemed to think that since I now had a family, his plan had worked. I just sat there in stunned silence, then looked him dead in the eyes and told him he should never have made that decision for me. He took away my choice and almost destroyed me in the process. Then I got up and left. It's been a few days and I'm still a bit shaken. My partner knows something's up. He knows I met my ex, but he's giving me space, waiting until I'm ready to talk. I'm still processing. Did my ex seriously believe I'd just say, "Thanks for letting me know," and everything would be fine again? The audacity rocked me to my core. Update 1. Of course, I planned to leave this whole mess behind me and move on, but then my former mother-in-law reached out. I hadn't spoken to her in a few days, which is honestly very out of character for me. For almost 10 years, she has been so much more than just an ex's mother. She's been like a real mom to me. When things got rough with my own family, she opened her home, welcomed me in, and gave me a safe place whenever I needed it. She basically adopted me as the daughter she never had, and no matter what happened between me and her son, our bond has been unshakable. We typically have a good catch-up every week and chat in between, and I know that nothing I confide in her ever makes it back to her son. Anything that trickles down to him comes through our mutual friends, never directly. So when she reached out yesterday, worried because she hadn't heard from me, I decided to go over and see her. That's when she revealed that she had confronted her son about what on earth was going on, since my absence was so noticeable. He finally came clean to her, and she went absolutely ballistic. Right now, she's not even speaking to him. Then, she dropped a bombshell on me, something she thought I'd known from the start. Apparently, when he was born, he had undescended testicles and had surgery to fix it. There was always a chance this could cause fertility issues as an adult, and he was supposed to go for checkups once he'd hit puberty. He told her he'd gone to these checkups and everything was fine, but neither of us believed that for a second. So for 10 freaking years, every time we talked about having kids, he knew there was the possibility he was infertile, yet he never mentioned it. For 2 years of our relationship, we weren't actively trying but never used protection and agreed that, if something happened, we'd be happy. Then, Once we did start trying for a baby and nothing happened, I think he finally got the hint that something was off and decided to get that checkup he'd avoided all those years. I am absolutely flabbergasted. As for my current relationship, my partner and I are totally fine. He's used to my sulky moods, thankfully, and after a few days of being mildly annoyed, I told him everything. He agreed it was super messed up and, like many people would, thought the timing of my ex telling me all this was almost comical. For a while, we actually suspected the real reason my ex left was cheating, mainly because he got weirdly close to a girl in our friend group, most of whom dropped me the moment we split, by the way. According to his mom, though, there's nothing going on between them. But she did let slip another wild little tidbit. Apparently, he's not dating that girl at all, he's dating her 60-year-old mother. Good lord, his life is an utter dumpster fire. Update 2. Life had finally settled down, and honestly, I thought I was done with all the drama. After everything that happened, I just pushed it all to the back of my mind and tried to move on. Sure, it was shocking and it hurt for a while, but I decided to compartmentalize, focus on myself, and let the world keep spinning. Things felt peaceful again, as if I had reclaimed my life from the chaos. One night, utterly exhausted and running on maybe 3 hours of sleep, I discovered that things weren't as tucked away as I thought. Out of nowhere, I was hit by a wave of attention, something I hadn't asked for or expected. Apparently, my story was ripped by one of those content creators who slap an AI voice on top of Reddit posts and plaster it over Minecraft videos. I can't stand those kinds of pages. They take someone's real, personal trauma and just turn it into clickbait for views and money, all without ever trying to get permission from the person who lived it. But there it was, my story, chopped up and posted on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, all over the place, racking up thousands of views. The real trouble started when one of those videos landed on the For You page of a mutual friend from my and my ex's old group. Suddenly, the video was circulating among people I actually knew, and the speculation started. Are they talking about me and my ex? The details lined up too perfectly. Before I knew it, I started getting Facebook messages from a fake account, demanding that I delete my original post or make another one saying everything was fake. The guilt trip was unbelievable. Apparently I owed him one. Every time I blocked one account, another would pop up just to message me again. Eventually, I had to deactivate my Facebook because I couldn't keep up with the flood of harassment. Jacob, I know you're reading this. You are not the hero of my story. My life is what it is now because I put in the work and rebuilt myself after you tried to tear me down. You're still at it, still trying to mess with my head, but the difference now is that I actually see you for what you are, a manipulative narcissist. You hold no power over me anymore. You're not some great orchestrator of fate, you're just the sum of your own actions. Whatever went wrong in your life, you have no one to blame but yourself. Maybe it's time you found some real help and moved on, just like I did. Update 3. I thought Jacob's pathetic harassment campaign would be the end of it, but apparently the universe wasn't done throwing curveballs my way. About 3 weeks after I called him out in my last update, things took a turn I never saw coming. It started when my former mother-in-law called me, and I could immediately tell something was wrong. Her voice was shaky, almost fragile, not like the strong woman who'd practically raised me. She asked if I could come over, said she needed to talk to me about something important but couldn't do it over the phone. When I got there, she looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past month. She sat me down with a cup of tea and just started crying. Through her tears, she told me that Jacob had been stealing from her. For months, apparently. Small amounts at first, 20 here, 50 there, money she'd assumed she'd just misplaced or spent and forgotten about. But then larger sums started disappearing from her savings account. When she finally confronted him about it, he broke down and admitted he'd been taking money to pay for some kind of treatment he couldn't afford. That's when she dropped the real bombshell. The fertility issue? It was never just about low sperm count. Jacob had been hiding a serious drug addiction, prescription painkillers that had started after a back injury 2 years into our relationship. What I'd thought was depression and mood swings during lockdown was actually withdrawal and the desperate scramble to get pills. The nights out with friends were trips to sketchy dealers when his usual sources dried up. The fertility doctor had actually told him that the medication he'd been abusing could have been affecting his fertility all along, and that getting clean and staying clean for at least a year might restore his chances of having children. But instead of coming to me, instead of getting help, he decided it was easier to just blow up our entire relationship and let me think I wasn't enough for him. I sat there listening to this woman who'd been like a mother to me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, pure, white-hot rage. Not just at Jacob, but at myself for ever believing his sob story about wanting me to have the family I deserved. He hadn't been noble or self-sacrificing. He'd been a coward who chose drugs over me, over us, over everything we'd built together. But the story gets worse. Remember that 60-year-old woman he's supposedly dating? Turns out she's been his dealer this whole time. And her daughter, the one from our friend group that we thought he was getting close to, she's been helping him steal from his own mother. They'd worked out this whole system where the daughter would distract his mom while Jacob rifled through her purse or accessed her online banking. His mother was devastated. She kept apologizing to me, as if any of this was her fault. I held her while she cried and promised her that Jacob's choices had nothing to do with her, but I could see the guilt eating her alive. The worst part? My partner had been right about the timing. Jacob didn't reach out to confess and clear his conscience, he reached out because he was desperate. His dealer was threatening him, he owed money all over town, and he was hoping that somehow, some way, I'd feel sorry for him and help. When I walked out of that coffee shop without offering him anything, he panicked and started the harassment campaign. 3 days after his mother told me everything, Jacob showed up at my door. I was home alone with my daughter, my partner was at work, and Jacob looked absolutely terrible. Hollow cheeks, shaking hands, clothes that hung off him like he'd lost 30 pounds. He started begging, saying he was sorry, that he'd do anything to make it right. He asked if he could meet his replacement, my partner, like this was some kind of negotiation he could win. I told him to leave, but he wouldn't. He kept talking about how we could work something out, how maybe we could all be a family together. It was completely delusional, and I realized he was probably high right then and there. When I threatened to call the police, he finally left, but not before saying something that made my blood run cold. "You don't know what you're doing to me. I had a plan, and you're ruining everything." I immediately called my partner, then his mother, then 911. The police took a report, but since Jacob hadn't technically threatened me directly, they couldn't do much. They did agree to do extra patrols around our neighborhood though. That night, my partner and I had a long conversation about safety, about our daughter, about what we'd do if Jacob escalated further. We've installed security cameras, changed our locks, and I've started staying at different places with the baby when my partner has to work late shifts. Jacob's mother has cut him off completely now, changed her locks, closed the bank accounts he had access to, even got a restraining order. She texts me every day to check on us and apologize again for her son's behavior. I keep telling her it's not her fault, but I know she blames herself for not seeing the signs earlier. The saddest part is that I genuinely don't know what Jacob will do next. His whole world is falling apart, no money, no family support, dealers breathing down his neck, and whatever fantasy he'd constructed about getting me back completely shattered. Part of me wonders if this was always going to be the ending, if the man I loved for 10 years was always just a fiction he'd created to hide who he really was. My partner has been incredible through all of this. Never once has he made me feel like this drama is too much or that he resents being dragged into it. If anything, it's shown me just how different he is from Jacob, how he faces problems head on instead of running from them, how he protects what matters to him instead of destroying it. I'm scared, I'll be honest. But I'm also angry enough now that I refuse to let Jacob's chaos steal any more of my peace. Whatever happens next, I know I'm not the same woman who sat in that coffee shop 3 months ago, still carrying some small hope that maybe we could find closure. That woman is gone, and good riddance. Update 4. I wish I could say things calmed down after my last update, but Jacob's spiral has somehow managed to drag more people into this mess than I ever thought possible. 2 weeks ago, I was at the grocery store with my daughter when I spotted someone familiar in the cereal aisle. Sarah, the girl from our old friend group who'd been helping Jacob steal from his mother. She looked rough, like she hadn't slept in days, and when she saw me, instead of the awkward avoidance I expected, she actually approached me. "We need to talk," she said, glancing around nervously. "It's about Jacob." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a park the next day. What she told me there made my stomach drop. Apparently, Jacob's dealer, Sarah's mother, Linda, had been playing a much longer game than any of us realized. She'd been targeting Jacob specifically for months before our relationship ended, knowing from Sarah that he came from money and had a stable relationship. Linda had been the one feeding Jacob pills, gradually increasing his dependency, all while pumping Sarah for information about his family's finances. But here's the part that made me physically sick. Linda had been pushing Jacob to break up with me from the very beginning. She knew that as long as he had a stable relationship and family support, he'd eventually try to get clean. She needed him isolated, desperate, and completely dependent on her. The whole fertility story? That was Linda's idea. She'd convinced Jacob that it was the kindest way to push me away while making sure I wouldn't fight for him. Sarah was crying as she told me this, saying she'd gotten swept up in her mother's manipulation too, but that seeing what it was doing to Jacob, and learning about the harassment campaign against me, had finally opened her eyes. She begged me not to go to the police yet, saying she was trying to get evidence against her mother first. I should have said no. I should have walked away right then. But something about the way she was shaking, the genuine terror in her eyes when she talked about Linda, made me hesitate. That hesitation almost cost me everything. 3 days later, my partner was working a late shift and I was home alone with our daughter when someone started pounding on our door at nearly midnight. Through the peephole, I could see Jacob, but he looked worse than ever, wild-eyed and clearly not thinking straight. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but then I heard Linda's voice too. "Open the door, sweetheart. We just want to talk." My blood went cold. They weren't alone. I could hear at least one other person with them, maybe two. I crept to the window and saw a van parked in my driveway, engine still running. This wasn't just Jacob having another breakdown. This was planned. I called 911 while hiding in my daughter's nursery, whispering into the phone while she slept peacefully, completely unaware that her world might be about to change forever. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me, and I could hear them trying different windows now, testing to see if any were unlocked. Then I heard something that made my heart stop, the sound of breaking glass from the kitchen. The next few minutes felt like hours. I could hear them moving through my house, Linda's voice directing Jacob to check upstairs while someone else ransacked what sounded like my living room. I pressed myself against the nursery door, phone clutched in one hand, the other hovering over my sleeping daughter, ready to grab her and run if they found us. When the police sirens finally pierced the night, I heard scrambling, cursing, and then the sound of the front door slamming. By the time the officers got inside, they were gone, but they'd left behind a trail of destruction that told the whole story. My house had been torn apart, drawers dumped, couch cushions slashed, even picture frames smashed on the floor. But it wasn't random vandalism, they'd been looking for something specific. Cash, jewelry, anything valuable they could grab quickly. Linda had probably convinced Jacob that since he'd given me my happy life, I owed him something in return. The officers found Jacob's fingerprints everywhere, and the van had been caught on a neighbor's security camera. Within 6 hours, Jacob and Linda were both in custody. Sarah turned herself in that same morning, finally ready to tell everything she knew. That's when the real scope of Linda's operation became clear. Jacob wasn't her only victim, she'd been running this same con on vulnerable men all over the city for years. Get them hooked, isolate them from their support systems, then use them to steal from their families before moving on to the next target. Sarah had been her accomplice in at least 4 other cases, though she swears she never understood the full extent until it was too late. Jacob's mother came over the morning after the break-in, took one look at the mess, and just started sobbing. She kept saying "I'm so sorry" over and over, like any of this was her fault. Later, she told me that Jacob had called her from jail, begging her to bail him out, promising he'd go to rehab and fix everything. She'd said no, the first time in his life she'd ever refused him anything. He chose this, she said, her voice hollow with grief. I can't save him from his own choices anymore. The weird thing is, I almost felt sorry for Jacob when I saw him at the arraignment. He looked so small and broken, nothing like the man I'd once planned to marry. But then I remembered my daughter's face when she woke up that morning to find her home destroyed, remembered how scared she was of the loud noises she'd heard in her sleep, and any sympathy I had evaporated. My partner has been amazing through all of this, but I can see the toll it's taking on him too. He's installed a full security system, changed our daily routines, and I know he lies awake some nights listening for sounds that shouldn't be there. We've talked about moving, starting fresh somewhere Jacob and his chaos can't reach us, but we shouldn't have to uproot our lives because of his bad choices. The trial is still months away, but Jacob's lawyer has already reached out about a plea deal. Apparently, Jacob wants to write me a letter, a real apology this time. His mother thinks I should consider reading it, that maybe it would help me find some closure. But I don't think I need his closure anymore. The man I loved died years ago, probably around the time he took his first pill. What's left is just someone wearing his face, someone who was willing to terrorize a mother and child because he couldn't face the consequences of his own choices. I'm done being part of Jacob's story. From now on, he's just a cautionary tale in mine. Update 5. I thought the worst was behind us after Jacob's arrest, but apparently his story was far from over. The trial was set to begin in 6 weeks, and I'd been doing my best to move forward. New security system installed, therapy sessions helping me process everything, and my daughter finally sleeping through the night again. My partner and I had even started looking at houses in a different neighborhood, ready to truly leave this chapter behind. That's when Jacob's lawyer called. He explained that Jacob had been clean for the 3 months he'd been in jail awaiting trial, and that his client was desperate to make amends. Not just the letter his mother had mentioned, Jacob wanted to testify against Linda and provide evidence that could put her away for decades. But there was a catch. He would only do it if I agreed to meet with him first, with his lawyer present. He says there are things about your relationship that you still don't know, the lawyer said. Things that might change how you see everything that happened. I immediately said no. I was done being manipulated by Jacob's games. But then the prosecutor called me directly. Linda's case was falling apart. Sarah's testimony was being questioned because of her own involvement, and without Jacob's cooperation, Linda might walk away with just a few years. She's destroyed at least 6 families that we know of, the prosecutor told me. Jacob is our best shot at stopping her. My partner was furious when I told him I was considering it. She's using you again, he said. Even from jail, he's still finding ways to mess with your head. But something about the prosecutor's tone made me think there really was more to this story. The meeting was set for the following Friday at the courthouse. I walked into that sterile conference room expecting to see the broken shell of a man I'd seen at the arraignment. Instead, Jacob looked different. Healthier, yes, but there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before, genuine fear. Thank you for coming, he started, but I cut him off. Just say what you need to say so I can get out of here. That's when he told me about Marcus. Marcus was Linda's previous partner, the one she'd been with before she set her sights on Jacob. According to Jacob, Marcus had been Linda's perfect victim, wealthy family, addiction issues, completely isolated from his support system. But when Marcus tried to leave Linda and get clean, she'd orchestrated something that made my blood run cold. Marcus had died in what looked like an overdose, alone in his apartment. But Jacob had overheard Linda bragging to another dealer about how easy it was to help someone along when they became more trouble than they were worth. She'd apparently slipped something extra into Marcus's usual dose when he threatened to expose her operation. I think she was planning the same thing for me, Jacob said, his hands shaking as he spoke. The night we broke into your house, that wasn't supposed to be a robbery. Linda kept talking about how we needed to tie up loose ends and how you knew too much. She had Sarah bring something in a syringe, said it would make you go to sleep if you fought back too hard. My lawyer, yes, I brought my own lawyer to this meeting, immediately spoke up. Do you have any proof of this? Jacob nodded and pulled out a phone. Linda doesn't know I have this. It's got recordings, text messages, everything. But she's got people on the outside who are still loyal to her, and if I turn this over without protection. He trailed off, but the implication was clear. Jacob wasn't just afraid of prison anymore, he was afraid Linda would have him killed before he could testify. The prosecutor took the phone, and what we heard over the next hour made me physically sick. Linda's voice, casual as anything, discussing which of her boys would be easiest to dispose of. Sarah's voice, younger and scared, asking what would happen to me and my daughter. And Linda's response, don't worry about them, sweetheart. After tomorrow, they won't be a problem for anyone. I had to leave the room twice to throw up. But the most chilling part came at the end of one recording. Linda was talking to someone whose voice I didn't recognize, discussing payment for cleaning up the mess. The voice was professional, cold, and agreed to handle the family for an additional fee. She hired someone, Jacob said when I came back into the room. A professional. The only reason you're alive is because the police showed up when they did. My world tilted. This hadn't been about money or drugs or Jacob's desperate attempt to fix his life. This had been about murder. Linda had planned to kill me and my daughter, probably make it look like a robbery gone wrong, all to protect her operation. The prosecutor was already making phone calls, and within hours, Linda's charges had been upgraded. The new evidence meant Jacob would likely get a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation, but he'd still be going to prison for several years. As we were leaving the courthouse, Jacob grabbed my arm gently. For just a moment, I saw a flash of the man I'd once loved. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, he said. I know I destroyed everything good in my life. But I need you to know, the man who loved you for 10 years, the man who wanted to build a life with you, he was real. The addiction took him away, but he was real. I looked at him for a long moment, this person who'd caused me so much pain but had just potentially saved my life. I believe you, I said. But that man is gone, Jacob. And I'm not the woman who loved him anymore either. As I walked away from the courthouse, I felt something I hadn't expected, relief. Not just because Linda would finally face justice, but because I finally understood that Jacob's choices, all of them, had nothing to do with me. The drugs, the lies, the manipulation, none of it was because I wasn't enough or didn't love him enough. My partner was waiting for me in the car, and when I told him everything, he just held me while I cried. Not from sadness this time, but from the overwhelming realization that we were finally, truly safe. Linda was sentenced to life without parole 6 months later. Jacob got 8 years, and he'll be eligible for parole in 4 if he stays clean and continues cooperating with authorities investigating Linda's other victims. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Jacob had just told me the truth from the beginning, about the fertility issues, about the addiction, about everything. But then I look at my daughter, at the life my partner and I have built together, and I realize some things happen exactly as they're meant to. Jacob may have thought he was orchestrating my happy ending when he left, but the truth is, I created my own happiness. And no one can take that away from me now.